A large group of British politicians has called on Prime Minister Boris Johnson to impose sanctions against Israel if it goes ahead with its plan of annexing parts of the occupied West Bank. In a letter, 130 MPs expressed their outrage at Israel's declared plan. They call the annexation an illegal and prohibited move under international law that would also ruin any chances of peace between Palestinians and Israel. The signatories joined 11 European ambassadors to Israel, who earlier raised the alarm about the repercussions of Israeli plans to annex parts of the occupied Palestinian territories. The Arab League has also warned that the move constitutes a new war crime against Palestinians. The Israeli regime is planning to implement its annexation plans in July. I'd like to welcome my guests to this news review. Out of London, Press TV's very own Richard Sudan and Sha'ath, the author and a Middle East expert out of Belfast. Welcome both of you to the program. Let's start this off with Richard. So, Richard, what is going on? I mean, we see Israel doing what it always does, but tell me about this time around. We have at least 130 British MPs expressing outrage at this. Can you fill us in?
Exactly, and it comes off the back of the news that the ICC are preparing to potentially investigate war crimes into Israel as well. Now, we know that around 130 British MPs from across different parties have written to the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who is, of course, back in action now. And they've said, and the language here is very interesting, they've said Israel's actions would clearly demonstrate illegal activity if they push forward with their plans to annex the West Bank in Palestine. It's interesting as well because I think over the last few years, certainly since 2014, you have really seen, I would argue, public support for Palestine growing and growing. Certainly reflected in demonstrations in the streets, and no doubt, certain members of the public would have been putting pressure onto their MPs to write to the Prime Minister, not just Boris Johnson, but previous Prime Ministers. But regarding the impact, as well as the kind of symbolic validity of this letter, it really depends on what Boris Johnson decides to do with the letter, with the call for action. Of course, he's well aware of what Israel is doing, but I'm afraid many people here will tell you that Boris Johnson hasn't really demonstrated himself ever to be a friend of Palestine. He's spoken up for Israel time and time again, even when Israel is conducting war crimes, acknowledged around the world by human rights organizations as war crimes. So let's see what happens. It'll be interesting to see any kind of response from Boris Johnson. Whether indeed he does respond at all remains to be seen. But this is a very interesting piece of news nonetheless.
Yes, indeed it is. Well, Saad, I mean, as the rest of the world is fighting frantically, trying to fight the COVID-19, we see, as Richard described accurately, the Israeli regime committing more and more war crimes. Tell me your take. Why now? Why do you think that the regime is planning on annexing more land and has actually announced it now?
That's after Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said it was Israel's decision whether or not to annex parts of the West Bank. And we see Netanyahu swang in action, negotiating a right to annex parts of the West Bank from the 1st of July with the coalition deal that he signed with Benny Gantz, the Kohol's Lavan party. Then we witnessed the reaction of Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian leader, who he obviously said lost all hope in the United States of America. And Abbas announced, after consulting with the Palestinian leadership, that the decision he takes to dissolve the Palestinian Authority if Netanyahu and Gantz's government annex 1 inch of the occupied West Bank. Abbas in that translate the action will be in just let the Zionist entity pay for the occupation of the West Bank, administrating health, water, economy, civic needs of 2 million Palestinians under occupation. But the golden holy cow in here for the US and the European Union and the Zionist entity as well is security of the Zionist entity and its colonial settlers in the West Bank as well, while the cooperation between Israel and the occupation forces of Israel and the Palestinian Authority security forces reining in successfully the Palestinian resistance in the West Bank, breaking up the Palestinian Authority and its security branches will mean the Palestinian resistance will get stronger and will be more effective as it is in Gaza, and then it will threat the colonial settlers within the West Bank. And that move as well, there is another side to it. The European Union, when they condemn this as a serious violation of international law, and when the EU and the UK invest heavily in the West Bank and the two-state solution, economically and politically, to shore up the survival of the Zionist entity through an historical Palestine through the two-state solution. But if the two-state solution won't be translated into action in the ground, it's mean we are faced with one-state solution, which will turn in the future as West Africa apartheid state. This is the model they don't want to be existing. They don't want it to exist in the Middle East. The Zionist entity, Israel, is going that direction. If the Palestinian Authority collapses, it means there is one state solution, the Likud party vision, which means as well we're going to see a Zionist apartheid state which the West cannot support, and their plan and a project to have this Zionist entity in the heart of the Middle East will collapse.
Thank you so much for being with us, Richard Sudan, Press TV's correspondent out of London, Sha'ath, author and Middle East expert out of Belfast.